We get to the last two sections of chapter 16 that entail small group communication. We've already looked at the significance of small group communication, and we've also looked at small group responsibilities. Now we look at Dewey's guideline, the seven-step reflective thinking process established by Dewey over 100 years ago. The seven steps essentially are: first, identify and define the problem. Second, analyze the problem. Third, determine acceptable criteria for a solution. And then fourth, generate possible solutions through brainstorming. Five, choose the solution that fits the criteria. And then six, implement the solution. And then you never stop, but you've got to, at the end, reassess to make sure that your solution actually fixes the problem. All right, let's start off at the beginning then. Identify and define the problem. Of course, that's the important thing. You all have to be on the same page. The group, the team has to be on the same page, knowing exactly what the problem is. What's the nature of the problem? So identify and define it. And the second step really fits into this first step, and that is find out what the group knows about the problem. What does the group not know about the problem? What resources does the group have to fix the problem, to implement the solution at the end of the day? Find out what caused the problem. What are the factors that seem to relate to the beginning or the origin of the problem? Remember, a causal relationship is different from a causal relationship. So you have to make sure that something caused the problem and know what that is. Find out how long the problem has been an issue and how widespread, how significant the problem is. Third, determine some criteria. So money is a scarce resource, time is a scarce resource. You have to figure out exactly what are the criteria for an acceptable solution. Establishing criteria keeps the group members from just proposing a wild solution that, one, is not feasible, it's just not practical, it's got too many logistical issues. And then fourth, you begin to generate the possible solutions. Now you do this through brainstorming. And the process of brainstorming entails that you don't evaluate at all. In fact, you give the group a certain amount of time, 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and generate as many possible solutions as possible. Be creative here. Think out the box. Nothing is off the table. Anything and everything. No critical evaluation at this point. And then fifth, choose the solution that best fits the criteria. And this will take some time as you think all the possible solutions that have been proposed. You might synthesize some of the solutions, and that probably will happen. A little bit of this solution, a little bit of that solution that may work the best for the problem itself. And then the hard work comes, and that is implementing the solution. Coming up with the solution is one thing. Implementing it might take a whole lot of time. And there's quite a bit of work that's involved in implementing and figure out who all the stakeholders are, because as you implement the solution, they have to be a willing part of the process. And then reassess. Were you successful as a group? Did it solve the problem? Did it only partially solve the problem? You got to figure out exactly what the nature of your success is. All right, so we shift gears now because I'm going to put both the two last segments into one video. And we're going to look at strategies for presenting in a team or a small group setting. Certain things are essential if you're going to propose and speak to a small group. One, again, in any act of communication, audience analysis is essential. Who is my audience? Culture, background, demographics, all those things. We'll get to more of that later on. Each presentation that you prepare as a group member should have a clear introduction, a clear body, and a clear conclusion. Your research must be sufficient, it must be supported, and at the end of the day, the presentation itself must be organized effectively. When you deliver, you can't be scripted. Scripting it doesn't show relevance at times, and it doesn't help you connect with the audience if it's too scripted. So your delivery must be engaging and extemporaneous. Extemporaneous means that you've prepared in advance, you've rehearsed it a few times, but when you actually present it, you have as few notes as possible in front of you, and that you are coming up with the sentence as you speak. You already internalize some of the language and the ideas, and it sounds fresh if you speak extemporaneously. We'll get to more of that later in the semester. Avoid, again, an over-dependence on notes. Also, find a small group format that best suits your purpose. We spoke about the different formats in the earlier segment. And then the individual speeches that you give as a group must flow as though they are one coherent speech. So, how do you go about the process of making sure that it flows as one coherent speech? One, you've got to determine the speaker order, who goes first, who goes second, who goes third. You've also to discuss the formality of the presentation. Will you allow for some interruption from the team members? Will you allow for individuals to wander from their prepared remarks? You got to figure out the time constraints for the speech overall and for each speaker. How do you signal to one of the speakers, one of the team members, if they're taking too much time, speaking too long, the audience is getting restless? Who will deliver the team's introduction and conclusion, and who will direct the Q&A session at the very end? How will you introduce the next speaker, and how will you preview what they're going to speak about? What types of presentational aids will you use? Here's some specific strategies now. First, limit the number of points that you make. Otherwise, you'll overload the audience with information and they won't be able to process that information. Avoid repetition, especially make sure that your presentations don't overlap. Don't repeat what another group member has said, and don't say what another group member is planning to say. Meet in advance to practice your presentation on stage. If you don't, it will sound very unrehearsed, the audience can tell, and it will seem very awkward. Restrict your speech to the allotted time as that the audience has given you, and then for each member to make sure that they stay within their allotted time. So if you take too much time as one group member, you'll run into somebody else's time, and they will have to rethink and rework, and doing it on the spot may cause some stress. Prepare for audience questions, anticipate, and then also figure out who will answer those questions, because some questions will deal with certain aspects of the speech that belong to certain team members. Consider enhancing your presentation with presentational aids. We talked about that. All right, that's the essence of chapter 16. Cool.